First up, you'll have heard the news in the past few moments that seriously injured Gazans, 81 people, are going to be allowed through the Rafah crossing into Egypt for medical treatment. You must welcome the news, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it, in what is needed?
We certainly welcome it, and let's hope this is an indication that some of what must happen, which is a greater flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza to civilians there, space for more of the hostages as well to come out, and the restoration of basic essential services to the civilian population in Gaza are properly in place and restored as well.
But John, I mean, the Labour position is this: no ceasefire, Israel has a right to defend itself, strikes should continue in order to degrade Hamas infrastructure. In the meantime, the Gaza Health Ministry say there have been over 8,000 deaths. Can you, in good conscience, still hold this line? Shouldn't you think again?
I mean, we're all anguished when we see the images of what's happening in Gaza. Everybody wants to see a reduction in the humanitarian suffering of the innocent Palestinians. And Keir Starmer said in his speech today that you've just reported on, he totally understands why people are arguing for a ceasefire. We want to see the alleviation of suffering. Everyone in Labour wants to see that. But he says, and the important argument he was making there is a ceasefire is not for now the correct approach for two reasons. First of all, any ceasefire freezes a conflict, and therefore Hamas fighters, weaponry, command centres would still all be in place.
But it stops the killing.
And secondly, what we all want to see, which is more aid, less civilian casualties, and a reduction in the conflict, can best and most likely be secured by a break in the fighting or humanitarian pauses. And that's something that important allies like the US and the European Union also
this is it, isn't it, that he really, rather this is about him wanting to be seen as a Prime Minister in waiting that doesn't want to break ranks with what the UK government are doing or the US government. That's what's going on, isn't it?
No, he's arguing both from a principled and a practical point of view, and it was an important speech today. He's saying he understands why people are calling for a ceasefire, but what people want to see is an alleviation of the suffering of Palestinians. And in these circumstances, respecting Israel's right to self-defence, balanced by the basic human right of Palestinians to not to suffer, the best, most likely way of trying to achieve this, any sort of break, will be humanitarian pauses and not a ceasefire.
John, Keir Starmer is out of step with his party and he's out of step with public opinion over a ceasefire. Is this the biggest crisis of his leadership?
No, it's not. What he was doing today was important. He was setting out the single common purpose.
Because the party is splitting. You've had over 20 councillors resign. You've got people on resignation watch. You've got the London Labour Mayor disagreeing with him publicly, as has the Manchester Mayor, as has the leader of Scottish Labour. Are you telling me that's not a leadership crisis? So
the single common concern in the Labour Party, and more widely, and in the public...
You don't think that this is a problem for him?
Part of the reason for his speech is he wants to give fresh leadership to this. He wants to explain why he takes
he does acknowledge it's a problem.
Of course. And one of the reasons is he wants to set out the arguments. He wants to bring people together. He wants to emphasise the single common concern we've got for the reduction of civilian casualties, getting more aid into Gaza and more hostages out. The area that we share in common is much greater than the difference over tactics. And his judgment for now, for two reasons, is that a call for ceasefire is not the right approach. And that's partly because it would allow Hamas fighters and threat to remain in place to menace Israel in the future. And secondly, the most likely way of getting what we want to achieve is through breaks in fighting and the sort of developments we've seen, very welcome developments with seriously ill Gazans being allowed out of Gaza for proper treatment.
And just finally, collective responsibility. It seems like if you're on the Labour front bench, you can say what you want to say about this. I mean, collective cabinet responsibility, shadow cabinet responsibility in front, it's broken down, hasn't it? You can't enforce it because he's going to end up having to sack people.
No, it's not.
He can't enforce it, John. What Keir
Starmer's done today is an act and a speech of leadership. He wants to pull people together. He wants to make the arguments that the best way of achieving what we all want to see is not by a ceasefire. But he also has been very clear today, you know, a political party and he requires collective responsibility, and that's important too.
So just finally, very quickly, if someone in the shadow cabinet publicly disagrees with the position that Keir Starmer has set out, should they resign from the shadow cabinet? Well,
I hope the arguments that he set out...
Should they, though? If there's collective responsibility.
Let's see. He's made important, principled and practical arguments today in a way that we haven't seen from any other leader, including from Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. He wants to bring people together, but he will require collective responsibility because any political party does require that in the future.
That suggests to me that you're telling your shadow cabinet to not speak out. John, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.